All right, in the last lesson, we started exploring the date range method that's available directly on the Pandas library, and we supplied it with two arguments, one for our start parameter and one for our end parameter. And that allowed us to define the start and end points of our time range, and then using the frequency parameter, we were able to specify how to separate that time span in chunks in order to generate a brand new Pandas date time index. And as I mentioned, two out of those three of the first three parameters have to be filled out in order for the date range method to function properly. And in this lesson, we'll look at another combination. Instead of doing start and end, we're going to do start and periods. So let's begin by calling our date range method again. I'm going to begin with PD, which is our Pandas alias, dot date range, open my parentheses. And let's keep our start parameter. Let's give it a value. Let's say I want to start at, let's say, September 9th of 2012. And we can see here end is the second parameter in line, and that's what we provided in the last lesson. This time I'm going to give an argument to this periods parameter. Now what periods represents this time around is the number of results that we want to get. So in this case, the number of timestamps that we want to generate, starting from this date. So Pandas is now going to ignore basically the end date. It's just going to look at the start date and generate however many periods we want. So for example, if I set 25 here, and if I take a look, we can see that our frequency parameter is still set to D here. I'm going to write it out explicitly just so we have a reminder that it's present, and I like to do that in case we forget. When I execute this, we're going to get a date time index, and it's going to have exactly 25 values. I can even prove this by passing this into len, and you can see it equals 25. It's created 25 because we've specified that we want 25 in our periods parameter. And how has it done that? Well, it started at September 9th, which was our start date right here, and then it generated 25 periods with each separation or each chunk defined as a frequency of 1 day. So the 25 days represented here are each 1 day apart. If instead I wanted something like 50 days, I would just add 50 as my parameter argument instead of 25. Now I have a date time index of 50 days starting from the 9th of September 2012 and separated by a day. Now, just like with our previous application of the date range method, we can modify the frequency argument in order to specify what we want. So now, if instead of 50 days straight from September 9th, I wanted 50 business days starting from September 9th, you may recall we have that B option for frequency, so that's business days. So because we're not going to be counting weekends, but we're still going to be generating 50 days, the end date here is going to be a little bit further down the road because we're not going to include those weekend dates. So now we have 50 business days starting from the 10th and proceeding to November 16th. Now you may be wondering, why are we starting from September 10th if our start date here is specified as September 9th? Well, the reason, of course, is because September 10th is a Monday. And we can figure that out by the simple fact that it appears first here. The reason that September 9th is not showing up is because it has to fall on a weekend. And as we know, whenever we set a frequency of B for business days, it's going to exclude a date if it falls on the weekend. So this is basically saying generate 50 business days from us, but since our start date falls on a Sunday, it's going to start at the next point and generate 50 days from that point. So it's going to start on Monday the 10th. Here we have Tuesday the 11th, Wednesday the 12th, Thursday the 13th, Friday the 14th, and then we can see it's skipping the 15th and 16th, which represents our Saturday and Sunday values, and then going to the 17th, and then proceeding onwards until it's generated 50 business days for us. We can also do something like W for weeks. Now what that's going to do predictably is generate 50 weeks starting from the 9th of September 2012. Keep in mind again that this is starting a week on Sunday. So what we can see here, and we know, by the way, from our previous example that the 9th is a Sunday, so we can see here that it is going to be the very first value in our date time index. And now we have 50 dates, each separated by 1 week, which is our frequency, and we know we have 50 because that's our argument to the periods. So this date right here, 2013-8/18, represents 50 week increments from our start, which is September 9th. Now, as you may recall, the W is the same as writing W Sun, which kind of sets the start of the week as Sunday. But if I wanted to modify that, I could provide a different weekly acronym. For example, if I wanted to start my week on Tuesday, it would ignore this because the 9th is on a Sunday. So the very first day would be 10/11. So 11 is what falls on the first Tuesday. So it would start our first date in our datetime index as 9/11. There you can see it right here. And then it's going to have 50 dates because we specified 50 periods and proceed until it has 50 dates in our datetime index. And everything else that we practiced in the previous lesson is also valid. So for example, if I wanted 50 month starts starting from this moment on, I could do MS. And that's going to give me the start of 50 months coming up ahead. So again, September 9th falls past that deadline of September 1st. So the very first month here is going to be October 1st, right after this month. And then it's going to give me 50 months or 50 periods until we end right here on November 1st, 2016. I can do the same thing with years. I can do 50 years with our A argument, and then I'm going to generate the end of each year starting from 2012 and proceeding to 2061. So now you can see we've generated that stuff very quickly. And as we also perhaps discussed in the last lesson, we also can specify things like custom ones. So we know if we have something like H, we can do hours. That's going to generate 50 hours starting from September 9th. So we're going to start at midnight on September 9th, then proceed to 1 a.m. on September 9th, and so on. That we discussed in the previous lesson. What I didn't mention is that we can also create custom ones. Like instead of H, which is by hour, let's say we wanted to create it 6 hours apart. All we have to do is add 6H, and what that's going to do is generate 50 timestamps starting at the beginning, September 9th, which is our start point, and then the next one is going to be 6 hours later. So the same date at 6 a.m., here it is the same date at noon, and then to 6 p.m. in the evening, and then we're back at midnight the next day, and it's going to proceed to create 50 periods of that, so 50 total values, up until it reaches the 21st of September at 6 o'clock. So that means that the 21st of September at 6 o'clock is exactly 50 6-hour increments later, or 300 hours later, than the 9th of September at midnight. So again, this is just an alternate way that we can use the date range method. Instead of using the start and end parameters, we can utilize the start and period parameters. The start remains the same. That's our basic building block, where we're starting from, what date we're beginning from. Periods now allows us to specify how many values we're going to have in our datetime index, how many dates or timestamps we want to generate from that starting point. And frequency is going to define the separation between each of those periods. So we can specify D for day, B for business day, W for week. We can do custom ones like 6 hours apart here. And that allows us to generate a datetime index that is going to be guaranteed to have a certain number of valid timestamps. You remember in the previous lesson, depending on where that date fell, for example, in our week argument, it may have been 2 elements versus 3. In this case, the periods parameter allows us to guarantee however many total date times we're going to have in that final datetime index object that's generated. So it really depends on what your data set requires and how you need to generate those dates. But this is just another way that we can utilize this very flexible date range method to generate our datetime index. And in the next lesson, we're going to dive into another combination of parameters that we can use, which is going to be end periods. So I'll see you there.